London, 1888, a city cloaked in fog, its cobblestone streets glistening under the dim gaslights. Shadows danced on alley walls, and the air carried the acrid scent of coal and despair. Life in the East End was a struggle, where desperation clashed with survival. This was the hunting ground of John the Ripper. John wasn't a man of poverty or the streets. He was a surgeon by day, a quiet gentleman known for his unassuming demeanor. But when night fell, the guise of civility peeled away, revealing a monster driven by a compulsion he couldn't resist. A young woman named Evelyn Harrow, a tailor by profession, walked briskly through the alleys of Whitechapel. The clock struck midnight as the heavy mist swallowed her figure. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind her. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth, and the last sound she heard was the whisper of a blade. Her body was discovered hours later, posed horribly under a street lamp. Her throat was slashed, and the letter J was carved into her chest. Detective Inspector Harold Greaves arrived at the scene, his brow furrowed as he examined the horror before him.
Another one,
He muttered. This was the third murder in a fortnight, each more gruesome than the last. The killer had left no trace except for the enigmatic J on each victim's body. Greaves and his team combed through Whitechapel, interrogating anyone who might have seen or heard something. A witness came forward, a poor street child who claimed to have seen a man in a top hat disappearing into the fog near the crime scene.
He's a ghost. A phantom, I tell you.
The boy exclaimed, his voice trembling. The description was maddeningly vague. Greaves' instincts told him the killer wasn't a phantom but a man who blended into London's crowded streets. A man who knew how to vanish into thin air. Meanwhile, John watched the chaos unfold from his study. His outward calm concealed the storm inside his mind. He carefully planned each murder, each cut, each symbol. He saw himself not as a monster but as an artist, painting a masterpiece in blood. Weeks passed, and the city was gripped with fear. Greaves became obsessed, his office a clutter of maps, witness statements, and crime scene photographs. Each murder seemed to taunt him, the killer always one step ahead. Then, a series of letters began to arrive at Greaves' office, each one more chilling than the last. The first read.
Inspector Greaves. Your pursuit intrigues me. Shall we play a game? Solve this riddle, and perhaps you'll find me. A place where stone angels weep, and names are carved to sleep.
Greaves immediately recognized the clue, Street Giles Cemetery. At midnight, he arrived at the graveyard, lantern in hand. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own as he combed through the tombstones. Suddenly, he found a freshly dug grave with a wooden marker. A note was nailed to it.
Too slow, Inspector. Better luck next time.
The game had begun. Each subsequent letter contained riddles that sent Greaves racing across London. From the Tower Bridge to the docks of Wapping, each location led to another gruesome clue, a blood-stained glove, a lock of hair, or a piece of torn fabric. The killer seemed to delight in taunting Greaves, leading him on a grim and eerie treasure hunt. At one point, Greaves found himself at the Royal London Hospital, where he uncovered a hidden message etched into a scalpel.
The hunter becomes the hunted.
Greaves began to sense that the killer was always watching, lurking just out of sight. One night, after another fruitless search, Greaves returned home. As he entered his dimly lit study, he froze. The air was wrong, heavy with a chilling presence. On his desk was a single candle, its flame flickering wildly, and beside it, a freshly severed hand gripping a note.
Did you enjoy the chase, Inspector? The final move is yours.
The hand belonged to one of his officers who had disappeared days earlier. This wasn't just a game anymore, it was deeply personal. Greaves began hearing whispers at crime scenes, soft, agonized voices that seemed to emanate from the blood-soaked cobblestones. The voices guided him to clues, leading him deeper into the mystery, but also further into despair.
Help us find him.
They murmured, leaving him unsure if he was losing his grip on reality or if something supernatural was at play. One day, the killer's taunts turned even more personal. Greaves found a wax likeness of himself, its face carved with haunting precision, its chest punctured with needles. A note pinned to the effigy read,
I know you better than you know yourself. Soon, you'll see.
Shortly after, his sister Mary was abducted. The next letter promised she would be the masterpiece unless Greaves solved the next riddle in time. As Greaves pursued Radcliffe, he stumbled upon a horrifying revelation. Radcliffe wasn't acting alone. He was part of a covert society of nobility who viewed murder as an art form. They funded Radcliffe's masterpieces, delighting in the chaos they wrought. The deeper Greaves delved, the more powerful and untouchable the society seemed. Every clue, every whisper, every victim seemed to lead back to them. In one of his most harrowing discoveries, Greaves found a victim alive, strapped to a grotesque clockwork device. Her heartbeat powered the mechanism, and the ticking would stop, killing her if Greaves couldn't solve the killer's puzzle in time. He succeeded, but the experience left him shaken to his core. The image of her terror-stricken eyes burned into his memory. To make matters worse, a copycat killer emerged, mimicking Radcliffe's methods but with slight differences. Paranoia tore through Greaves' team as they began suspecting one another. In a moment of clarity, Greaves uncovered an old photograph showing himself as a child in the background of a fair. In the foreground stood John Radcliffe as a boy, staring directly at the camera. Had Radcliffe been fixated on him all these years? The killer's final masterpiece was an elaborate trap at a masquerade ball, attended by London's elite. Greaves infiltrated the event, only to find himself surrounded by people wearing masks eerily resembling the victims. The Ripper's voice echoed through the hall.
Let us see who the true artist is.
In a moment of horror, Greaves realized the aristocrats weren't just spectators, they were participants. Each mask was a symbol of their complicity. The killer's voice cut through the room one last time.
The masterpiece is complete.
Radcliffe revealed himself, laughing as Greaves confronted him.
Do you see now, Inspector? You were always part of this. The society needed you to chase me, to perfect the narrative. Without you, there'd be no legend. You, Mr. Greaves, were merely a pawn in the enlarged board of intense chess. A puppet for our amusement.
Radcliffe laughed. Greaves was paralyzed by the harsh reality of things. As Greaves wrestled with the truth, Radcliffe escaped into the shadows, leaving Greaves to dismantle the society. But the whispers of the victims followed him, their cries unresolved, their justice incomplete. Months passed without another murder. The city began to breathe again, but Greaves couldn't let go. One night, he received another letter.
Dear Inspector, you've been a worthy adversary, but I tire of this game. Tonight, I leave London. But before I go, a gift awaits you at the Thames. Farewell, J.
Greaves rushed to the Thames, where he found a woman bound and gagged but alive. A note was pinned to her dress.
For now, the game ends. But remember, Inspector, the artist always returns for his final masterpiece.
As Greaves looked into the misty river, he saw a shadowy figure watching from a distance. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. But this time, the figure whispered something that echoed in the wind.
Next time, it will be someone you love.
The story of John the Ripper faded into legend, but Greaves knew better. Somewhere out there, the monster was waiting, biding his time. And Greaves would be ready, for he knew the final masterpiece would be painted in his own blood.